In a fantastical world teeming with monsters and magical gates, Byakuren, the S-rank hunter guild, was consistently lauded as the best guild in the world. After successfully defeating one of the 7 infamous demon lords wreaking havoc on the human world. In their golden era, everyone believed that they achieved their strength through strenuous training and hard work. Sadly, the truth was quite the opposite. As the secret was unveiled that the Byakuren hero team had obtained their power through much darker methods. Methods that, if revealed, would shatter the moral pillars of the human world. As it turns out, the hero team of 5 or 6 warriors obtained their so-called strength by imprisoning and constantly exterminating 2 immortal monster siblings, Makoto and Minori, who were descendants of the undead. In this way, these so-called heroes farmed experience points like chickens to level up and maintain their dominance in monster subjugation. The fame of the Byakuren Guild began when their hero team snuck into the palace of one of the demon lords controlling the monsters of the world. The moment the demon king noticed the intrusion, he welcomed them with open arms, preparing for a battle to the death. The first member to open the attack, Ishiki Seiya, the ultra-celestial swordsman, dove into the demon king's skeletal minions, wiping them out with a single strike. Soon after, he was energized and awaited his partner, Kongu Chikara, to enter the demon king's throne room with him. When the second warrior arrived, Chikara tossed a burning log at the demon king. But the demon king shattered it with his high-temperature fire technique and warned the intruders not to be presumptuous. He then prepared an even bigger fire attack. Luckily for Seiya and Chikara, the group's mage, Sageri Aya, appeared just in time to cast an ice shield, successfully blocking the flames and leaving not even a scorch mark. After being saved by Aya, the pair sat down, chatting about how intense the flames in the ice shield were. As they were conversing, their support member, Abe Taro, suddenly jumped out of a portal and gave them recovery potions to regain their strength. After drinking the potion and thanking Taro, Seiya turned to look at their leader, the hero Haruto, and asked if he was ready to fight yet. Haruto, after thanking his team for the help, activated the power of his holy sword and landed the finishing blow on the downed demon lord. A day after the victory, the local news broadcast their success to the public. Upon hearing this news, the people praised and applauded Akaren's S-rank guild for bringing a glimmer of hope to humanity in the fight against the demons. As it turns out, 200 years had passed since the first gates and creatures appeared on Earth, and with the defeat of one of the 7 demon lords, humanity finally had a fighting chance. During a live interview, Sato, a news reporter, introduced the members of Byakuren, congratulated them and asked how they became so powerful. Seeing that they were all S-rank hunters, the public eagerly awaited an answer. After a brief and awkward pause, Haruto lied, claiming that they achieved their strength through daily training. Soon after the interview, the hero and his comrades returned to their lair, complaining about how difficult and necessary their work was. In their dungeon, they pulled up the 2 imprisoned monster siblings, Kiryu Makoto Shin and Kiryu Minori Shin, mocking them for being rude. Haruto walked over, thanking the 2 monsters for helping them become stronger, and then nonchalantly decapitated Makoto. At the time, it was discovered that legendary beings, or demons, had to be slain in order to grind XP and level up. However, there was a loophole. If someone found an immortal monster capable of regenerating severed body parts, they could farm infinite XP and become exponentially stronger in a short period of time. As Makoto regenerated and Haruto leveled up, he taunted the helpless monsters, licking the blood off of his sword, once Haruto was done leveling up. Chikara and Aya walked up, brutally attacking both siblings for more XP. Chikara with his fists, and Aya with her magic flames. Then it was Teru and Seiya's turn. Teru poisoned Minori, while Seiya slashed Makoto, leveling up tenfold before declaring their training session over. As the group prepared to leave, Chikara complained that their training wasn't enough yet, he needed to get stronger, while the others chastised Chikara for his stamina obsession. Seiya noticed that Taro looked anxious and asked him if something was wrong. Taro confessed that he had not been able to collect data about the poison he wanted, and then snapped at Minori, demanding her to act normal. Seeing Taro getting worked up, Seiya encouraged him to relax and have some fun with Minori. Immediately, Taro pounced on Minori, muttering offensive statements while drool dripped down his face. Finding the situation dull, Seiya glanced over at Minori's body and suggested they find a way to impregnate the monster to see what would happen. as Makoto dreaded what was about to happen. Teru called Seiya a genius for the idea. So he asked Aya to hypnotize Minori so that she would obey. Disgusted, Aya hesitated but eventually complied, chanting an enchanting incantation filled with lust, subjugating Minori's body. As the two bastards prepared to do a terrible thing to Minori, Haruto ordered Aya to untie Makoto. When she asked why, he grinned and said that it would be more entertaining if the brother was forced to watch his sister suffer without being able to intervene. Aya shrugged at their depravity but still obeyed her leader. Upon being freed, Makoto saw his sister caught between Seiya and Taro, and begged them to stop before he could act. However, Aya pinned him to the ground with a holy spear. Haruto laughed at Makoto's suffering, scoffing that holy magic wasn't very effective in suppressing monsters. As Makoto tried to curse them, Haruto quickly decapitated him, telling him to shut up and enjoy the show. But Makoto simply regenerated, trapped in a never-ending cycle of torment. After Seiya and Taro were finished, they dropped Minori's unconscious body and, while putting on their clothes, discussed their upcoming media appearances overseas. They also mentioned feeding their chimera before they left. Seiya teased Taro about his attachment to the creature, but then asked about the monster sibling seal. Taro waved it off, not wanting to wake Aya. They underestimated the weak monsters and left the dungeon. The moment they were gone, Makoto, still pinned down by holy magic, felt a sharp pain in the nape of his neck. Minori suddenly snatched Haruto's knife from his wound and stabbed herself in the stomach, desperate to erase the horrific memory from her head. As she continued to stab herself, she begged for every cell in her body to be replaced so that she could feel whole again. Her wounds were healing, and she turned to her brother, pleading with him to end her life so she could finally rest. Remembering Haruto's words about holy teachings preventing rebirth, Makoto decided to use it to release Minori. He instructed her to cut off his arm and she did so perfectly. Yet after all that, Makoto still regenerated, and the pain lingered. Immortal monsters always fully recover after death, as if they were playing a game with cheats. Minori hesitated, but with encouragement from her brother, she mustered up the courage to sever all 4 of his limbs, finally releasing him. With newfound determination, Minori proposed an idea, which Makoto initially vehemently opposed. She reasoned that instead of killing her, he should use her to exterminate those bastards and take revenge. Although against his nature, Makoto eventually agreed. And so, the two siblings began to take turns killing each other over and over again, leveling up again and again, all to prepare for the long-awaited revenge. To elaborate further, Abe Taro, the most useless member specializing in luggage carrying in the S-rank Byakuren hero team, was often known as a timid and quiet guy with no courage to fight as a warrior. However, those who knew him well, like his teammates, all knew that he was a peculiar individual who was fascinated by dissecting living things and performing gruesome experiments on them. 3 years prior, just before the group's hero discovered the inhuman shortcut to gaining power, Haruto called the team together for an emergency meeting to discuss a new plan for increasing strength, while the others were on their way. Haruto found Taro in another room, cutting out the internal organs of several dead monsters and piecing them back together with a crazed smile on his face. Haruto called out to him, praising him for working hard, and after getting his attention, asked if he wanted to dissect something more interesting than these useless monsters. Although a little confused, Taro obediently followed his leader to the meeting to discuss a secret room that the guild rarely allowed anyone to step into. Once the other 4 members had gathered, Haruto began the meeting by asking whether or not they were fans of glory. Still confused, most of them asked Haruto to elaborate so they wouldn't feel like they had wasted their time attending. Haruto continued by asking if they would follow him through a darkness with no way out, just to achieve a glory that no one had ever touched before. Chikara casually replied that it didn't matter how dark the path was as long as they were all heading in the same direction, as the others agreed with Chikara's sentiments. Haruto thanked them for believing in him and offered to lead them to a future full of glory and expansion. After a while, Haruto led them to a secret room in the basement of the guild building that no one thought existed. According to rumors Haruto had heard, the guild used to imprison the enemy forces who opposed them in this dungeon, which meant that there was definitely something valuable waiting when they reached the entrance. Haruto placed his hand on the scanner, making everyone around him curious about what kind of spectacle he was about to put on, and opened the door. Inside, Haruto introduced the zombie siblings, Minori and Makoto, to the group, who were shocked because they initially thought that these siblings were human. Seeing their fear, Haruto reassured them, explaining that although the siblings looked like humans, their blood was completely different. He went on to explain that they were part of the immortal tribe, which was thought to have been extinct long ago. To prove this, Haruto pulled out his sword and beheaded Makoto. Immediately, Makoto's head grew back, convincing the others that the immortal tribe was still alive and well. Still confused, the others asked how these two monster siblings could lead them to glory. At that moment, Haruto pulled out his phone and opened an app that measured the level of popularity in the guild. The app measured overall physical and magical strength, giving them a rank that determined their ability to fight creatures. Currently, Byakuren was S rank, meaning that at least one level 20 warrior was required to join the guild. Haruto then revealed his level on the app, which was level 50. Shocking the others. Normally, one cannot level up without defeating a monster, but since leveling up by fighting monsters is especially dangerous, Haruto had to find a safer way to get stronger. No sooner said than done, the guy immediately stabbed Minori, leveling up in a flash. And turned to Taro, who was seething with excitement. Haruto asked what was on his mind. And Taro exploded with enthusiasm, praising the idea. Taro then went on to talk about his peculiar desire to explore the limits of the human body. Constantly stabbing Minori and asking her how it felt to have her organs torn apart. In just a few minutes, he had leveled up and appeared pleased to do something peculiar to a beautiful girl. After removing her blindfold, Taro continued to stab her. This time he sprinkled poison on her and asked bizarre questions about what could kill her. Seeing Taro's extreme pleasure, Haruto reassured everyone that these creatures were no different from monsters. They cannot die. Since they are not human, no one will care what we do to them. Hearing this, the others also went berserk, killing the siblings over and over again. Haruto cheered them on and commented that these two siblings were as easy to handle as candy. In the present day, Haruto, Aya, Chikara, and Seiya all got off the plane in another state, looking very serious and complaining about the interview they were about to attend. Soon after, Seiya realized that Taro was missing and asked Haruto if he knew where he was. Haruto said that Taro was still at the guild building, continuing his experiments on the dolls. As the group continued talking, the scene switches to Taro, gleefully heading towards the dungeon to check on his dolls once more. As Taro entered the prison, he saw Makoto on top of Minori, constantly stabbing her. Panicked, Taro yelled at Makoto not to kill his precious doll, since their hard work would disappear like soap bubbles. Hearing his voice, the siblings stopped and stared at him. Embarrassed, Taro wondered why the siblings didn't look as weak as they did the night before. It turned out that constantly killing each other, even though their levels were far apart, had given them a huge amount of experience. By leveling up, their bodies underwent extreme changes in just one night. Now Taro turned pale as the two siblings approached. Realizing that he needed to act quickly, he rushed to the cage of the Chimera monster, rambling on about his special hideout and how the kids escaped, warning that they would not be able to escape as easily as they did. He released his chimera, still not shutting his mouth. Seeing this, the two siblings encouraged each other to be brave and prepare to embark on their revenge against the 5 heroes who had violated their rights. Just before the chaos began, Minori became frightened and retreated when faced with the Chimera monster. Understanding his sister's fear, Makoto reassured Minori that he would deal with the monster alone so she could sit this one out. After hearing what Makoto had just said to his sister, Taro chuckled and asked Makoto if he fully understood his plight. After all, he was about to enter a 1-on-2 match with an incredibly low chance of winning. And his Chimera monster was growling fiercely at the sight of fresh meat. Makoto ignored the bastard and stared intently at the Chimera's mouth while Taro continued to hurl insults at his family. While complaining, Taro suddenly made an offer to the siblings: just stay there, chained up, and obediently offer your experience points, so that I and my team can get stronger. If they behaved themselves this time, Taro even promised to offer Minori to his Chimera monster for a bit of fun. While debating what the child of a Chimera and an immortal tribe member would be like, Minori became frightened. Makoto stepped forward and vowed to send Taro far away. Laughing maniacally, Taro challenged him, a nobody other than food, to try to kill him to see what the outcome would be. Immediately after another maniacal laugh, the Chimera lunged towards Makoto with the intention of devouring him alive. But luckily, Makoto dodged the attack, being in awe of the Chimera's unexpected speed and strength. Just when he thought he was out of danger, Taro reached his hand out from a time warp with a knife, intending to assassinate him. Makoto reacted quickly, but ended up only receiving a cut on his forearm as a result. At that moment, Taro suddenly appeared from the corner of the room and advised Makoto not to run, as things were just getting more interesting. It turned out that when leveling up, warriors can receive special skills. The content of this skill varies depending on factors such as occupation, experience and race. Taro, also known as a Ranboy for specializing in doing all sorts of odd jobs, had pocketed a series of skills ranging from proficiency with objects, pharmacology, to even assassination. His special ability was to create space portals that connect different spaces. With this skill, he can not only transport objects in and out, but he can also use it for assassination, a rare ability. Having received the fighting power to defeat the Demon King, Taro possessed strength worthy of joining an S-rank guild and is currently one of the best out there. Therefore, he and his chimera monster were giving Makoto a lot of trouble in this 2-on-1 battle, cutting and slashing him whenever they had the chance. At one point, the chimera's tail snatched Makoto's leg and hung him suspended in the air, immediately after severing both of his forearms. With no time to waste, the chimera severed Makoto's arms, throwing him into the brick wall, and then leaving him as fish on a chopping block. Witnessing the whole scene, Taro chuckled uncontrollably, bad-mouthing the poor Makoto, calling him weak with his regenerative abilities and nothing more than food for leveling up. Minori, meanwhile, called out for her brother, and Makoto revived once again to face Taro and the chimera monster. By this point, Taro realized that he and his chimera could not overpower Makoto at his current level. Knowing this, he ordered the chimera to devour Makoto, and the monster immediately lunged at him, plunging its teeth into his body, no matter how much Makoto regenerated. Taro assured him that there was no escaping the chimera's power. Where can you run to? However, only seconds after tasting Makoto's blood, the chimera stopped eating and stood motionless, while Taro tried to figure out what had happened. The monster vomited a green liquid and rolled over dead. Distraught, Taro rushed over to check on his chimera, wondering what had gone wrong, only for Makoto to calmly state that he had done nothing to stop it, realizing that Makoto had fully regenerated by now. Taro blamed him for killing his precious chimera, and lunged at him, stabbing relentlessly as if there were no tomorrow. While doing so, Makoto mocked Taro, urging him to stop bleeding so much, or else he would die like his monster. Confused, Taro stopped and asked for an explanation, only to see green liquid seeping out of his hands. Almost instantly, he felt a burning sensation where his skin was turning green, and began to writhe on the ground, screaming in pain. It turned out that Makoto's second skill, poisoning, had been activated, turning his target into a deadly poison. His flesh and blood were the carriers of this poison. And now Taro was feeling the effects. Gasping for breath, Taro asked how Makoto could have a second skill when, normally, no one can acquire the unique skill of another race without strenuous training. Makoto calmly explained that he had acquired the skill due to Taro poisoning him for years. With that, Makoto grabbed the knife, plunged it through his arm, and let the poisoned blood flow onto Taro. He then kicked the bastard, causing him to beg for mercy. Makoto reminded Taro of the time he had stolen the peaceful lives he and his sister once had, and asked if Taro had ever stopped when they pleaded for forgiveness. If it were someone else, Makoto might have shown mercy, but after what Taro had done to Minori, there was no way he was going to let him off the hook. With that, Makoto punched Taro hard enough to almost kill him, just as Taro was about to kick the bucket. Makoto revived him with his regeneration skill. When asked why, Makoto simply stated that killing him quickly was not enough to quell his rage. He assured Taro, who always wondered what it felt like to have his internal organs shredded by a knife, that he would get his answer right now. A few hours later, the other four returned to the guild building. At the entrance, they wondered if Teru was still playing with the dolls. After a light conversation, Haruto told Seiya to look for Taro so they could celebrate their victory over the Demon Lord. Seiya obeyed and headed down to the dungeon, thinking to himself that there were no monsters down there who would want him to be their friend, right? Only to find blood everywhere, the corpse of the chimera beast lying in the middle of the room, and Taro's half-alive body suspended in mid-air, sizzling like a piece of fried meat. Before returning to the main story, an illustration is given to explain the life of another member of the 5-man group of the S-rank Byakuren Guild, Kongu Chikara. Chikara, an S-class martial artist, is also the strongest power user in Byakuren. To many, he is an emotional man, willing to sacrifice his life for his teammates. However, to those who know him well, his capacity for malice is immeasurable and has no limits. Once upon a time, Chikara was taking a walk with some low-level martial artists, who were discussing his muscular and impressive physique. One of them expressed a desire to have the same physique in the future, while the other assured him that no matter how hard he tried, he could never be like Chikara. Just then, Chikara chimed in and told them that although effort doesn't always produce immediate results, they shouldn't give up. He shared that without hard work, his muscles would not be what they are today. After giving them some more advice, Chikara walked away, leaving the fanboys in awe of his muscular body, and assuring them that he would continue to train hard. Once he was out of sight, he chuckled about his farewell and continued on with his day. Exactly a year ago, Chikara was beating and killing the siblings in a dungeon as they begged him to stop. Commenting on how beneficial his training method was, he asserted that becoming stronger by killing defenseless creatures was easier than any other form of training. With that action, Chikara picked up Minori and, while smashing her head into the floor, complained that his leveling speed had slowed down significantly lately. Having reached such a high level, he thought that it was unavoidable. Then he told the siblings that they should at least react when he killed them so that he wouldn't get bored. Makoto was still regenerating during this time, but Chikara didn't care, continuing to taunt him, trying to get him to say something. When Makoto continued to remain silent, Chikara decided to force him to scream, activating his power and punching Makoto so hard that Makoto broke 200 ribs in just one day. After a while, he got bored and urged Makoto to scream some more. When Makoto still didn't entertain him, Chikara turned to Minori, performing a dropkick after asking her to scream in a good voice. Upon impact, Minori screamed so loud that Chikara was impressed. This encouraged him to break about 100 more of her bones in order to reach his daily quota of 300. In the present day, Seiya sped to the gym to summon Chikara down to the dungeon to see what had happened to Taro. Once the whole team had gathered there, Haruto asked about the siblings' whereabouts, and Seiya explained that they had run away long ago as soon as they had arrived. Haruto realized that if the world found out that the siblings were still alive, things would get very bad for them. While Chikara checked Taro's heart, which was still beating weakly, a laptop nearby suddenly played a cheerful tune and showed a video of Makoto beating Taro to a pulp, while Taro was tied up like a roast chicken. Enraged, Chikara vowed to destroy the siblings when he found them. Immediately afterward, Haruto pulled his sword out of its sheath, and Taro was chopped into pieces. When Chikara demanded an explanation, Haruto calmly explained that Taro wouldn't make it, keeping him alive would only prolong his suffering. Seiya nodded in agreement, adding that even magic could not heal Taro after being so brutally tortured. Aya chimed in, saying that they should accept Taro's fate and focus on finding the siblings. Defeated, Chikara burst into tears and swore on his mother's name that he would kill those two. Seiya noticed that Haruto was daydreaming and tried to pull him back to reality. After a few tries, Haruto finally snapped out of it and asked what was going on. Seiya reassured him that everything was fine, and Haruto informed the group that they needed to let everyone know that Taro, the hero who had saved the world, had passed away. Someone suggested holding a funeral first, but Haruto insisted that they should prepare for a live broadcast instead. Miles away from the city, Makoto and Minori were running for their lives through the dangerous forest, hoping not to get caught. At one point, Minori fell and moaned that her legs felt like jelly. Realizing that Minori was probably exhausted, Makoto told her to rest for a bit and helped her find shade under a tree so they could both sit down. After a while, Minori asked Makoto if they had really escaped that hellhole, and he reassured her that they had. She started to sob, and her older brother gently stroked her head, promising that this time, he would protect her. Her cries grew louder and louder until she finally fell asleep. Seeing this, Makoto realized that she must have been exhausted. He reminded himself to stay alert, knowing that those bastards could attack them at any time. Just then, he too started to feel sleepy. But before he could close his eyes, he sensed a sudden surge of malice and quickly got up to investigate, leaving Minori behind, believing that she would be safer there. Leaping through the treetops in search of the source of the malice, Makoto saw a small house in the forest and stopped, wondering if the evil was coming from that building. As he pondered whether the occupants here knew of his presence, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his throat and realized that he had just been stabbed in the neck. He immediately jumped down from the tree, quickly realizing that he was surrounded. Confused and tense, Makoto demanded that the attackers introduce themselves and state their intentions before things got worse for them. As expected, the thugs paid no attention to Makoto's words. Instead, they wondered aloud if he was their target, noticing that there was no woman accompanying him. Even without a woman, they thought that earning 500 million yen just for kidnapping a person was too easy and encouraged each other to get the job done quickly. And so, the mage in the group gave the other fighters a dose of power-enhancing magic. When she was done, one of the combatants lunged at Makoto. Weapon armed and neck broken. Grumbling that this job was too easy, before they could celebrate, Makoto snapped his neck back into place. Shocking everyone, then asked if they were really subordinates of the heroes from the Byakuren Guild. Without waiting for an answer, Makoto lunged at his attacker, explaining that their identities didn't matter to him. He unleashed his signature haymaker, and added that anyone with malice towards him, no matter who they are, is an enemy. After taking down the first one, 2 more thugs jumped into the fray. Leaving the mage defenseless, seeing them approach, Makoto allowed one of them to sever his left forearm. But before it could fall out of reach, he grabbed it and used it to punch the second attacker, taking him down in a flash. As for the first one, Makoto grabbed him with his mouth and knocked him out with just one punch. With only the mage left, she panicked and attacked Makoto with purple lightning. Hoping to electrocute him, she watched him take the hit. The mage proudly boasted that her lightning was faster than anyone could be, as if she had already won. Unfortunately for her, Makoto revived himself once again, causing the mage to wonder who he was and how he possessed such terrifying regenerative abilities. Although she kept attacking like lightning, Makoto kept coming back. Now he was close enough. He promised not to let her escape, grabbed her and took her down like the others. About 30 minutes later, after tying the thugs to a tree, Makoto put on their clothes, which happened to fit him perfectly. He joked, urging them to forgive him for having spared their lives. The guy then returned to his lair and woke up his sister Minori. After some small talk, Minori asked him where he got the clothes. Makoto made up a story, saying that a kind person had given them to him. Believing the lie, Minori was overjoyed, and her brother showed off the outfit he had bought for her too. Once she finished changing, Makoto told her that they needed to move to avoid getting caught. For the next few hours, the siblings trudged through the forest as if they were searching for treasure that could not be found, only to be bitten by mosquitoes. Until they came to a waterfall. Makoto told his sister to rest in the cave next to the waterfall, and she did as she was told. After setting up camp, Makoto gave Minori some snacks that he had found in the thug's pockets earlier. While munching away, Minori thanked her brother. But Makoto knew that the emergency food reserves wouldn't last long, since the thugs had no useful information. Makoto decided to go to town to gather intelligence and food supplies. He warned his sister to hide well and promised to be back soon. Once Minori assured him that she wouldn't cause any trouble, Makoto zoomed into town like the wind. After selling the pile of thug stuff, Makoto wondered why it was worth so much. With the extra money, he happily bought food for his sister at the convenience store. He then sat on a bench outside and planned his next step. He knew Teru, whom he had killed, was just a pawn. The real monsters were the others in that group. Remembering the suffering they had inflicted on him and his sister, Makoto realized that he would need to find their weaknesses in order to defeat them. Just then, a news blimp flew by, broadcasting a live memorial service for Teru. The other 4 members of the guild discussed Teru's importance, portraying him as an intelligent and courageous teammate who had been brutally tortured and killed. As the broadcast continued, Haruto vowed to never forgive those who killed Teru. The crowd watching the broadcast erupted in anger, shouting obscenities at those responsible for Teru's death, unaware of his true nature. Only seconds later, the 4 heroes unveiled the faces of Makoto and Minori to the world, declaring them to be the ones who had brutally murdered Teru. Haruto sent a direct message to the siblings, promising that they would not escape and would face the consequences of their actions. As the broadcast ended, riots erupted, with people demanding that the authorities arrest the siblings and bring them to justice. Makoto, who knew the true evil nature of these so-called heroes, realized that they intended to continue concealing their crimes. But now that they had made their move, he was determined to drag them down. Several days after the infamous Kiryu siblings escaped, Haruto held a meeting with the 4 remaining members of his group. During the meeting, Chikara unleashed his anger on one of their private investigators, upset that the guy had returned without any useful information, as he punched the detective in the face for his incompetence. Aya suggested that they give up on chasing the siblings, reasoning that they had leveled up and no longer needed them. After hearing Aya's suggestion, a sleepy Seiya asked what would happen if the whole world found out what they had done to the siblings. Haruto quickly reassured him, reminding the group that they had ensured the world saw the Kiryu siblings as vicious criminals. With a bounty of 500 million yen on their heads, there was no way the public would believe the runaways over them at this point. A moment later, Chikara, upon hearing Aya's words, angrily asked if she was implying that they should let those siblings go after what they had done to Taro, as Aya tried to explain her point. Chikara's anger flared up, unable to forgive the torture and death of his teammate. He vowed to catch the siblings and make them suffer a hell more terrible than anything they had ever imagined. Although Aya understood his feelings, she reminded him that Taro was the weakest member of their group, which was why he was targeted. Hearing this, Chikara flew into a rage and forbade Aya from speaking ill of Taro. Aya had to hold him back to prevent a further disturbance, pointing out that she didn't think those siblings posed any real threat to them. Before the situation escalated further, Haruto chimed in, reminding everyone of the bloody message the Kiryu siblings left in the dungeon. If that message was real, it meant that the Kiryu siblings were still targeting them. Even so, Haruto reassured the group that there was no need to panic, as the siblings would show up eventually. In addition, with the whole world on their side and a public bounty, anyone who saw the siblings would report them immediately. As Chikara calmed down, Haruto told the group to stay calm as they were still the heroes of the world. After a brief pause, he announced the end of the workday, urging everyone to rest in preparation for their next move. As the others left, Chikara remained seated, seething with anger and vowing to destroy the siblings once he found them. In the next scene, Minori wakes up in the hideout and greets her brother, who has been awake for a long time. She tells him about the wonder of illusion magic, as it helped her sleep soundly without any nightmares. After complimenting her on having had a good sleep, Makoto tells her that it's time to move, as staying in one place for too long risks being caught. Confused, Minori reminds her brother that their faces are very familiar because they are wanted criminals. But before she could continue, Makoto chimed in and reassured her that he had something useful. He pulls out 2 masks from his backpack, explaining that they will conceal their faces while leaving a clear view, just like modern-day ninjas. After trying it on, Minori is convinced that her brother's plan may work. With the masks, they will be much harder to spot, even if they accidentally run into enemies. Without wasting any time, Makoto got up and urged Minori to follow him. She asked if they had a destination, and Makoto tells her that they are entering a dungeon. To clarify further, the so-called dungeon is like a hidden world, separated from the real world by a gate, where the laws of physics are treated as a joke. It's a place where ordinary people are not allowed to enter, so it's become an ideal hiding place for runaways like them. As they began their journey, Makoto explained that the dungeon's complex terrain made it an ideal hiding place. According to the guidebook he bought in town, there was a poison swamp dungeon on the summit of the mountain they were climbing. Since it was a dangerous area that even hunters rarely explored, it would be an ideal base for them to train their strength and prepare for their revenge plan. After hours of climbing, they finally arrived at the gate. Makoto reassured Minori that he would always be with her every step of the way and jumped into the gate with her. Inside the dungeon, they discovered a toxic ecosystem filled with poisonous plants and creatures, all waiting for their prey. As they looked around, Makoto realized that no one could enter this place unless they possessed similar abilities. However, he warned Minori not to let her guard down. Just because there are no hunters around doesn't mean there won't be anyone with poison immunity finding them, you know. As they moved forward, Makoto stepped on a root of a vine monster and was sprayed with seeds by a carnivorous plant. After removing it, he warned Minori to avoid stepping on the vines, as there were likely many more traps. As Minori anxiously replied, she noticed something and alerted her brother. Makoto turned around and saw flying monsters all over the place. Sensing his sister's fear, he told her to leave this to him, and lunged at one of the creatures, quickly taking it down. But as he was off guard, another monster stealthily approached from behind and bit a chunk out of him. Fortunately, Makoto revived only a second later. While dodging the monster's successive attacks, Makoto commented on its strength and speed, noting that it was stronger than Teru and the chimera he had faced before. Realizing that a new strategy was needed, Minori unleashed an enhancement spell on himself, and Makoto noticed his severed arm moving on its own. Realizing what was happening, he ordered the arm to move. And unexpectedly, it listened, opening the monster's mouth. With the mouth agape, Makoto lunged forward and punched the monster to death. After the fight, Minori rushed to her brother's side, asking if he was okay. Makoto told her that he was just a little tired. After the battle, Makoto pondered about the usefulness of the new ability and wondered if it had appeared thanks to Minori's enhancement right before continuing the fight against monsters, about a month after the siblings escaped. Chikara and his lackeys were exploring a high-level dungeon for training, only to stumble upon 2 wyvern dragons. As the lackeys cowered in fear, Chikara threw a giant boulder at one of the wyverns, crushing it, then lunged to attack the other one, and tore off a wing from its body to level up. Witnessing their boss's unrivaled strength, the shameless lackeys praised him, admiring how he easily took down the wyverns while they were defenseless. Chikara ignored the flattery and took a lunch break after the battle. As he ate, he irritably wondered where those damn siblings were hiding. One of his men attempted to appease his anger, pointing out that the bounty hunters had been scouring everywhere to find them already. Another lackey hesitantly asked if he could share what his friend had told him about a mysterious man. Chikara nodded sharply, implying go for it, man. And the man recounted how his friend encountered a masked man while trying to clear out the poisonous swamp dungeon a few days ago. Rumor had it that this mysterious figure killed a poisonous serpent with his bare hands and didn't die from its venom. Astonished, Chikara asked if the poisonous serpent was really an A-rank monster. When the subordinate confirmed it, he added that their venom was so deadly that it could instantly kill a mountain elephant. Other than Chikara, he couldn't imagine anyone else being able to defeat a monster single-handedly. At that moment, Chikara corrected him, saying that the world is vast, and they shouldn't be surprised if there are strong warriors beyond their understanding. However, deep down inside, Chikara felt a surge of curiosity. Someone capable of killing a venomous serpent with their bare hands was certainly no ordinary fighter, and he found himself wanting to meet this masked man. He then asked when the encounter occurred, and his subordinate replied that it was 3 days ago. If that was the case, Chikara speculated that the masked man might still be inside the dungeon. At that moment, the man reminded Chikara that the poisonous swamp was a restricted area, and was preparing to make a suggestion when Chikara punched him in the face for talking back. Without hesitating, he ordered the others to prepare. They immediately set off towards the poisonous swamp. If this masked warrior was stronger than the majority, Chikara was determined to meet him at all costs, whether he had to climb mountains or run through the night. A few hours later, Makoto felt that something was wrong, which Minori immediately picked up on. Anxious, she asked him about it. Increasingly concerned, Makoto leapt onto a dry tree branch so that he could clearly see the opening gate a few meters away. His instincts told him that the malice he sensed was none other than Chikara Kangu. Seeing the siblings worried, Minori began to worry as well. But Makoto jumped down, put on his mask, and told her that he would go greet their guest. Minori begged him to stay, but Makoto reassured her, saying that they were stronger now anyway. If anything, this was the perfect opportunity for them to take revenge. He told her not to worry. After all, his greatest strength was not dying. Hearing his calm, confident words, Minori took a deep breath and used magic to enhance her senses. As she watched him slowly disappear into the horizon, she reminded him to be careful. Unlike Taru, Chikara was on a completely different level. As Makoto approached the gate, he turned on his hawk eyes to eye out his prey. As expected, Chikara and his goons had just emerged from the mysterious gate. Makoto quickly realized that if Chikara remained close to the entrance, there was a high chance that he would retreat. Makoto needed Chikara to venture deeper into the dungeon. As he was weighing his options, a herd of poisonous pigs suddenly ran past. An idea sparked. Using illusion magic, Makoto cut his hand with a dagger and stabbed one of the pigs, activating his mind control skill. This ability allowed him to manipulate his target's perceptions for a few minutes by absorbing a part of their body. With his blood infused, the herd became berserk, charging straight towards Chikara and his goons. Only seconds later, Chikara and his group noticed the herd charging in like a storm. Undeterred, Chikara regarded them as a warm-up exercise and ordered his trembling subordinates to stop shaking and fight. As expected, a short battle ensued. Chikara mocked the pigs for being too weak. After the match was over, Chikara, who was already bored, told his subordinates to stand up and get moving. One of them hesitantly asked if they could rest for a bit. Annoyed, Chikara sternly asked what kind of weak nonsense he was blathering on about, before the man could explain. The poisonous fumes from the dead pigs rose into the air. Soon after, Chikara's subordinates started coughing up blood. Panicking and confused, realizing something was wrong, Chikara gruffly asked what was going on. Then the scent reached him, and it attacked him. But that didn't make sense. Poisonous boars don't release this kind of toxin even after they die. What in the world is going on? Before he could realize it, Makoto, now masked, suddenly attacked from behind. However, Chikara reacted in time, blocking the blow. As he regained his balance, he finally got a clear look at the masked man, who had made such a commotion, before he could open his mouth. The masked man stabbed himself in the hand with a dagger, probably practicing to be a ninja but overdoing it a little. This time, however, Chikara caught him and unleashed a thunderous punch. Makoto managed to block the punch but was still pushed back by the tremendous force of the blow. Standing still, Chikara flashed a wry smile. Impressive, he acknowledged the masked man's skill, agility, and stamina, commenting that he was as strong as rumored. With newfound enthusiasm, Chikara suddenly made a shift. He extended his hand and invited the masked man to join him. To make the deal more appealing, Chikara promised Makoto that if he agreed to be his subordinate under Byakuran's name, he would have fame, money, and women. He then asked Makoto what he thought of this hasty offer. And, after a short pause, he began to reiterate what he had said before about liking the strong and despising the weak. Chikara admitted that he had initially thought that his old goons had potential. But after seeing them die from such weak poison, he found them pathetic. He confessed that if he had known they were so useless, he would have just used them as sandbags and forgotten all about them. Hearing Chikara speak recklessly, Makoto inquired as to why he enjoyed tormenting the weak. Chikara replied that it was fun. He liked how they reacted predictably each time he punched them. They all said the same things, their faces twisted in fear and filled with despair. As Chikara enjoyed the memory of their helpless expressions, Makoto pounced on him to sneak attack him. Chikara blocked the blow, praising Makoto on the pretty punch, realizing that they needed to settle things like men. Chikara returned the punch with equivalent force. But as Makoto dodged and attempted to retreat, Chikara reminded that he never intended to let him go, even though Chikara praised Makoto's strength. Chikara prepared another brutal attack. In Makoto's mind, he finally understood why Chikara was regarded as a true monster. Before he could catch his breath, Chikara activated one of his secret techniques, the crushing punch, and punched Makoto straight in the chest, sending him flying back several meters. For Makoto, it was the most powerful punch he had ever endured. But Chikara was surprised that Makoto was able to withstand the blow. He thought he held back too much, only using 30% of his power. Makoto froze, realizing that even after taking such a terrifying attack, it still wasn't all of Chikara's power. Noticing Makoto wielding a weapon, Chikara encouraged him to use his full strength, promising to welcome every attack so that he could prove to him who the stronger one was. Makoto rushed at him with his dagger, like a skillful ninja in a movie, but in reality he was just trying not to trip over the ground. But as Chikara blocked it, he commented that Makoto wasn't taking care of his sword carefully. With such a blunt weapon, Chikara said, even if he used his full power, Makoto couldn't scratch him. After dealing with Makoto once more, Chikara paused the match and told him that now he should fully understand the difference in strength between them and realize that in his current state, he couldn't win. Makoto remained unfazed, telling Chikara to shut up and immediately launching another attack. While blocking the blows, Chikara realized that Makoto was the first person to dare to be so stubborn after witnessing his power. This only made him like Makoto more. Swept up in his excitement, Chikara used a ruthless hammer kick to knock Makoto down. After realizing what he had done, he chastised himself but quickly accepted it. As he was rambling on, Makoto's knife suddenly landed on Chikara's left shoulder. He looked down, only to realize that the tip of the knife was coated in poison, pulling the knife out of his flesh. Chikara was surprised how someone like the masked man was still standing, despite having had his internal organs crushed. In addition, his skin showed no signs of rotting, despite being exposed in the poisonous swamp. These gruesome truths led Chikara to believe that the masked man was not human. For a moment, he wondered if the masked man might be Makoto, but he immediately dismissed the thought as ridiculous. Annoyed by the masked man's resistance, Chikara increased his power a little further, appearing right in front of him and throwing him away like a rag doll. He then punched hard into the ground, causing a massive explosion that shattered the surrounding area. Makoto tried his best to shield himself from the explosion, but during the chaos, he lost his mask, exposing his face to Chikara, the second monster in the 5-member hero team. Upon seeing Makoto's face, Chikara immediately recognized him and laughed like a maniac, finally realizing how long he had been looking for him. Now that the truth was out, Chikara suddenly realized that Makoto's resilience was not due to his stubbornness, but rather to his regenerative abilities. Annoyed by his own stupidity, Chikara told Makoto that he had been hunting him all along, and now that the one who killed Abe Taro was standing right in front of him, he would make him pay with his life. In addition, all his previous talk about turning Makoto into an ally was thrown out the window. As Chikara assured that he would kill him, unafraid, Makoto smirked and asked if killing him would really make Chikara happy. Without waiting for an answer, Makoto darkly promised that he would not only kill Chikara, he would do something far more terrible. With the stage set, Chikara lunged at Makoto with murderous intent, oh my! Throwing rocks at him, Makoto attempted to deflect them with his bare hands. But he still got hit, taking damage. Right after the attack, Makoto was hit. Shortly after, Chikara leapt into the air and delivered a hammer kick, ensuring that Makoto could not escape. The wretched guy took the hit and paused for a bit to regenerate his severed limbs. As soon as Chikara lowered his guard, Makoto rushed to attack him, nailing him with a haymaker, but that madman didn't flinch. Chikara smirked, unimpressed, then asked if that was all Makoto had. To him, a punch like that was worthless. To illustrate what a real punch looked like, Chikara powered up and nearly blew Makoto's head off with his fist. After pinning Makoto to the jagged cliff face, Chikara inched closer and closer, expecting him to continue fighting. But when he got there, he was disappointed to see the poor guy was trembling. Realizing that the skinny brat was trembling in fear, Chikara burst into laughter. He told Makoto that the fear of his power had been deeply etched into his body, it didn't just disappear. After a few seconds of silence, Chikara stared into Makoto's fearful face and asked if he still remembered the hardships he had suffered at his hands. Slowly advancing toward Makoto, who was pretending to crawl away, Chikara smiled mischievously, excitedly awaiting the fun that was about to unfold. What he didn't know was that Makoto had secretly positioned his severed arm behind him, awaiting the perfect moment to strike. When the opportunity came, Makoto controlled his severed arm to attack Chikara from behind. Unfortunately, that madman easily punched the arm away. Makoto, did you think I wouldn't know your tricks? There was no way such a weak attack could take him down, not even in a million years. With that, he finally cornered Makoto and proceeded to punch him into the ground. At one point, Chikara stopped and demanded to know how Makoto had become so strong in such a short time. When Makoto remained silent, Chikara declared that he would continue to beat him until he got an answer. He also reasoned that if Makoto was here, his sister must be nearby. After he was done with Makoto, he promised to find Minori and play with her, hoping that she would be as fun. Hearing this, Makoto recalled every pain his sister had endured for no reason and allowed his rage to fuel him. But before he could act, Chikara had already crushed his head and decided to tie him up before he could regenerate. However, before Chikara could blink, Makoto had already disappeared. As Chikara was wondering where the slippery one had gone, Makoto suddenly appeared behind him, seething with pure rage and murderous intent. Chikara noticed that Makoto's regenerative abilities were faster than before, but what he hadn't expected was that Makoto was 10 times faster in every aspect. In a flash, Makoto teleported in front of Chikara, raising his fist in preparation to finish him off. Fortunately, Chikara reacted in time, trading punches with Makoto to defend himself. Acknowledging Makoto's speed, Chikara prepared a new attack, jeering that against overwhelming power, he had no choice but to be useless. As Chikara continually punched Makoto's face and arms, he chanted mockingly at Makoto's regenerative ability, "Regenerate, don't be lazy." Wondering how long his flimsy defenses would last, after a fierce confrontation, Chikara punched away both of Makoto's arms. He paused to berate Makoto for his incompetence and lack of logic. Instead of looking defeated, Makoto bared his teeth in a grin, causing Chikara to wonder what his next move would be. When he asked, Makoto simply stated that he was thinking the same thing. He was delighted that Chikara was more than just brawn and no brains. That comment made Chikara furious. But before he could react, Makoto controlled all of his severed arms. Chikara tore off of his body and ordered them to attack. Chikara remained unfazed, punching away the zombie-like hands. Annoyed, he asked Makoto if he really believed that such weak attacks could hurt him. But as he continued to swat them aside, he began to wonder what this strange power really was. It was at that moment that Makoto began his comeback. He reminded Chikara that even though he might have been trembling in fear a few minutes ago, that fear was now being replaced by something else, an emotion rising from deep within his body, hatred. Unwavering hatred. As he spoke, Makoto astonished everyone by ripping off Chikara's arm with just one punch. Now that he was finally on equal footing with him, Makoto challenged Chikara to a contest of strength. Enraged by the loss of his arm, Chikara vowed to turn Makoto into a living sandbag. Pouring all of his strength into his remaining arm, he charged at Makoto, promising to smash him into pieces so that he could never regenerate again. To counter, Makoto commanded all of his severed arms to fuse with his dominant arm, creating a giant fist, securely reinforced. With it, he withstood Chikara's blow, colliding directly with his attack. Unfortunately for Chikara, he lost the clash. Staring at his two severed arms, he was speechless. Standing above, Makoto asked what it felt like, try experiencing the pain, the hatred, and the fear that he and so many others had to endure. With a final chilling promise, Makoto assured Chikara that when he was done, he would have all those feelings etched into his body. About a week after the battle with Chikara Kangu, Seiya and Haruto were walking through one of the guild building's hallways, discussing preparations for the next battle with the Demon King, when Seiya suddenly mentioned working hard for Taru's. Upon hearing that name, Haruto froze and coldly asked Seiya to remind him who Taro was. Thinking that Haruto was joking, Seiya chuckled awkwardly and requested that he explain the meaning behind the strange question. Haruto, not wanting to be seen as a bad person, racked his brains until he finally remembered that Taro was their old hero team member who was recently killed. To save face, Haruto chuckled and told Seiya that he was only joking with him. In response, Seiya told him not to joke about things like that, as it wasn't funny at all. Hearing that, Haruto apologized, and Seiya changed the subject, asking why he hadn't seen Chikara, the musclehead, lately. Haruto told him that Chikara was probably out looking for those siblings as they were excellent sandbags anyway, as Seiya started to panic a little. Haruto reassured him not to worry, as Chikara was certainly strong enough to drag the siblings back. Agreeing with Haruto, Seiya grimaced and vowed to discipline the sandbags when they returned to the dungeon. At that moment, one of their subordinates rushed in, urging them to come downstairs to see a delivery that had just arrived. According to him, this delivery was both normal and weird. Sensing the urgency in his voice, Seiya and Haruto rushed down the stairs as if they were racing against time. When they arrived, they found Aya racking her brain about the delivery and asking what was going on. Aya stepped aside, giving them room to examine the package. To their horror, they discovered Chikara's bloody limbs crammed into the tiny box. Initially, Seiya didn't recognize the parts, but after seeing the signature tattoos, he realized they belonged to Chikara. Overcome with shock, the three remaining hero team members retreated to a private room to figure out who was targeting them. Aya performed a quick magic experiment to ensure that the limbs weren't fakes designed to deceive them. After 2 minutes of experimenting, she confirmed that the limbs truly belonged to Chikara. Seiya slammed his hands on the table in anger. While Aya wondered how someone as powerful as Chikara could have been taken down so easily, as she asked the obvious question, who did this? Haruto replied that the perpetrators had deliberately chopped up Chikara's limbs and sent them to the guild, indicating that they had a major feud with them. Aya also noted that because Chikara had been searching for the siblings for about a month now, it was very likely that the pair were responsible for the incident. Seiya threw a tantrum, insisting that there was no way those two could have beaten Chikara so easily, but Haruto said that he had been suspicious ever since Teru's murder. Although Teru was significantly weaker in battle compared to them, he was still much stronger than the average hunter. Now that both Taro and Chikara, who was known as the world's muscle man, had been defeated, they could guess that Makoto and Minori had gotten much stronger. Even so, Seiya didn't believe that they could have gotten strong enough to kill Chikara in such a short period of time. At that moment, Haruto asked his perplexed friend how the siblings could have gotten stronger so quickly. Seiya answered an obvious realization: by continuously killing them to level up. As he spoke those words, a shocking truth dawned on him. Haruto speculated that the siblings must have killed each other in order to level up quickly, helping them take revenge. The reveal shocked Seiya and Aya. Before Seiya could lose his composure, Aya urged everyone to calm down. While Chikara's fate was unfortunate, she said that they still needed to focus on what to do next. Realizing that talking would do no good with Seiya, she cast a spell to calm his nerves, making him drowsy. After Seiya left the room, Haruto looked at Aya and said, "Give me some time alone." And she nodded in agreement. Alone in the meeting room, Haruto approached the delivery box, picking up one of Chikara's bloody arms, and sneered at the thought that those siblings thought that they could threaten him by sending over some body parts from Chikara. Although Haruto found it hilarious that they thought they could get revenge, he tossed the limbs around the room. He acknowledged the power it took to defeat Chikara, but took notice that one of the eyeballs was rolling around on the ground. Crushing it under his foot, he called the siblings naive for thinking that he didn't see through their plans. At that moment, Makoto sensed that his severed eyeball was being crushed, and quickly decided to abandon his mission to inspect their lair any further. Worried about Minori, he decided to turn back. Fortunately, Makoto managed to do some shopping during his delivery run and got a few nice snacks. He also added shape memory magic to his clothes so that they wouldn't get holes or need washing each time he went to pick up supplies. After mumbling a checklist of his purchases, which included a souvenir for his sister, Makoto stealthily made his way to the secret base. On his way back, he spotted a young masked woman being chased by a group of hunters. Realizing that he was in Byakuran territory, Makoto decided that it was best not to get involved. However, when the hunters finally cornered the woman and slowly advanced toward her, Makoto, unable to ignore the bullying, leapt out at them and quickly beat them down. Knowing that there must be a reason why she was running away, after the battle, he urged the woman to escape. But upon seeing her face, he immediately recognized her and asked why she was there. A few minutes later, as Minori wondered if her brother had returned, Makoto returned to the hideout with a load of supplies. And a new guest, startled, Minori asked what had happened. But Makoto told her to calm down and take a good look at their visitor. From which Minori did. She was stunned to see someone with an exact copy of her face. In the next scene, everyone discovered that the third member of the hero group, Seiya Ishiki, was actually the proud leader of the Byakuran Guild and an S-class swordsman with the most powerful sword skills on the planet. In addition, he was known to be extremely popular with ladies due to his handsome appearance, friendly personality, and easygoing attitude. Outwardly, these notable traits made him appear to be the mood maker of the Byakuran who had practically no flaws. However, those who knew him well, especially the members of his hero team, were well aware of his perverted and twisted desires, especially towards women. For years, Seiya had spent most of his life hurting defenseless women, only to eventually grow bored when they died or passed out. Fortunately for him, upon discovering that Minori was an immortal woman, he became even more excited and eager to satiate his thirst. In a flashback, Seiya is seen praising Minori, calling her the greatest woman he had ever played with. Unlike the others, no matter how much he hurt her, she wouldn't die. Having said that, he stabbed his sword through her stomach yet again. Reveling in her painful screams and calling it sweet music, for him, women are only valuable when they are suffering, and he was determined to keep it that way. As Seiya was torturing Minori in the memory, Makoto, standing nearby, asked him why he was always torturing Minori. In response, Seiya stuffed his sword into Makoto's mouth and told him that torturing men wasn't as fun as killing them, and that harassing women was much more fun, since they are more fit for it. With that, Seiya picked up Minori and told her that he looked forward to hearing more screams. After he was done with Minori, Seiya stepped out of the dungeon. On his way back, he saw Haruto and Taro entering a burger joint, where the burgers were so big that they could be used as pillows. This is the text: the room that is normally strictly off limits to anyone but Haruto. Curious, Seiya stealthily followed them, hiding behind corners until Haruto caught him and called him out for peeping. To avoid trouble, Seiya apologized, explaining that he was curious because Taro had entered the room with him. Haruto waved his hand, saying that everything in the room was garbage anyway. Then he turned to ask Seiya if he wanted to sit and watch. Seiya trailed behind him, entering a top-secret laboratory, as secret as a family's fish sauce recipe. Once inside, Seiya confusedly asked what this place was. Taro revealed that Haruto had asked him to create clones of Kiryu Minori. Haruto added that they thought if they could mass-produce clones capable of regeneration, they could grind XP much more efficiently. Using all of his resources, they finally succeeded. However, things did not go as planned. After being taken down about 10 times, those clones stopped regenerating. To make matters worse, killing them didn't drop any experience. Even attempts to improve them were too difficult, so they decided to dispose of the clones. Intrigued, Seiya asked if they were really planning to throw them all away. Taro said that although they planned to do so, there was one last thing to use them for before disposal. Taro also admitted that nothing could replace the feeling of satisfaction from the real thing. After staring at the clones for a while, Seiya chuckled and told Taro to give them to him. Taro warned that the clones had no will or emotion. They were defective dolls who only blindly followed orders. Even so, Seiya still called them his perfect toys, leading to Taro wondering if Seiya was really excited about the dolls. Seiya defended himself, saying that he was only interested in this kind of doll because he liked to cherish, torture, violate, and use their entire existence as a sex tool to satisfy his pleasure. After hearing Seiya's disturbing confession, Haruto humorously praised him for relying on dolls to seek happiness, calling him an absolute scumbag. After hearing the story from one of the clones, Minori truly felt nauseated upon realizing how truly inhumane Seiya was. When Makoto asked her if she was okay, she reassured him that she was okay. Makoto then asked the clone if the others had fallen into Seiya's hands. While the clone didn't know the full truth, she confirmed Makoto's suspicions. She knew that at least half a dozen of her sisters were being taken advantage of by him, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Perplexed, Makoto asked why she seemed different despite knowing that clones had no emotions. The clone replied that she didn't know. But when she accidentally saw them on TV, a warm sensation stirred within her. She realized that she felt hatred and resentment towards Seiya, and upon realizing these emotions, she snuck out of the mansion. She begged the siblings to help free the others still trapped inside. Makoto proposed that they could use the clones to eliminate Seiya, but Minori insisted on knowing what he meant. Makoto explained that Seiya didn't know that clones had emotions, so he wouldn't be on guard around them. He believed that they could use this to their advantage. However, Minori asked, what about the girls if they get caught? When Makoto confessed that in the worst case scenario, they would be killed, Minori slapped him. She reminded him that, although these girls didn't choose to be born, they were still living beings. She insisted that he should not talk about using them or letting them die. Because these girls were created from her cells, she considered them as her sisters. Realizing the importance of her words, Makoto suggested that they could instead use the clones to infiltrate the mansion. He reminded Minori that this was their only chance to take revenge on Seiya. However, Minori confronted him for being willing to sacrifice others to achieve his goals, comparing him to their enemies. Stunned by her words, Makoto calmed down and reassured that he didn't mean it that way. Minori declared that she would save her sisters and kill the one who saw them as trash with her own hands. Makoto stood up and vowed that they would rescue the clones and save all of them. After apologizing, he assured her that they would do everything right. Back at the mansion, Seiya flew into a rage when he discovered that a brainless clone had escaped, and no one stopped her. As he regained his composure, he ordered the remaining clones to find the missing clone immediately, and the clones promptly left the mansion to carry out the mission. About an hour later, the clones caught up with the hooded escapee and chased her through an alley until she tripped on something and was captured by the clones. Then reported the progress to their boss at the mansion. As the clones returned, Makoto and the fake Minori stood on a nearby rooftop, their eyes wide open, and quickly realized that their plan had succeeded. The real Minori had been tracked and apprehended. The clone standing next to Makoto asked if the real Minori was okay. Makoto reassured that Minori wouldn't be taken down easily. So he instructed the clone to accompany him to the mansion, and she immediately complied. When they finally reached the mansion, Makoto and the clone hid in a bush near the entrance gate. Awestruck by its immense size, the clone stated that their only mission was to serve in this place, triggering Makoto's memories of his last encounter with his real sister before the surgery began. In a flashback, it was revealed that Makoto gave the real Minori his severed ear while she was busy drawing the clone's tattoo on her right cheek. Initially, Minori was horrified to receive such a bizarre object. Makoto explained that the ear was an application of his body manipulation skill. He told her that if she carried the ear inside the mansion, he would be able to hear everything that happened inside and rush in if anything went wrong. Satisfied with his answer, Minori nodded in agreement and went to work. Now that she had infiltrated the mansion, Makoto relied on his sister to gather useful information. Around that time, the remaining clones finally arrived and reported to their master that they had captured Clone No. 10 who tried to escape. Annoyed, Seiya wanted to know why she had run away in the first place. The real Minori, posing as a clone, apologized and explained that she had seen a suspicious figure outside the mansion and gave chase to them. To avoid suspicion, she assured Seiya that she had taken care of everything and that there was nothing to worry about. In response, Seiya threatened to dispatch her if she ever acted on her own again. When he made sure that she understood, he informed everyone that he had been summoned by Haruto for a remote meeting and ordered them to handle everything while he was gone. After receiving confirmation from his subordinates, he sped out of the room with the speed of a chased rabbit. Still standing outside the mansion, Makoto, who had eavesdropped on everything the bastard had just said to his sister, wondered if he was serious. Inside, the clones escorted Minori to their master's special room, where she nearly vomited upon seeing dozens of dead clones scattered across every corner. As if that wasn't enough, she watched other living clones clean up the corpses of their own kind. Horrified, she turned to the clone who had escorted her and urged her to escape before Seiya discovered they were gone. Minori was in shock. Clone No. 3 asked why they needed to run. Dumbfounded, Minori could hardly believe it when No. 3 insisted that serving the master was their duty. Ignoring her, Minori spoke up, calling out to the other clones in the room, asking if they really understood what was happening to them. One clone casually replied that they were simply disposing of corpses, while another wondered why there was a problem with that. By this point, Minori burst into tears, unable to understand why they couldn't see the horror of the situation they were in. She insisted that they couldn't possibly be happy here. In response, the emotionless dolls asked her to define happiness. Struggling to find the words, Minori heard one of them declare that they were slaves to their master, and didn't need will or self-awareness. They only existed to serve, accept punishment, and offer up their bodies on command. Nothing more, nothing less. Makoto, who had been listening to every word, was livid with anger. He punched his hand into a tree trunk, wishing that they would wake up and see the truth. Meanwhile, Minori was arguing with No. 3 about the morality and the way they were being treated. As the argument ended, she wrapped her arms around No. Kurin asked if she felt any pain from her last encounter with Seiya. No. 3 told her to stay away, but Minori refused to let go. She knew full well that their claims of having no will or self-awareness were bogus. They simply didn't know how to properly express their emotions. In the end, she reassured them that there was nothing to worry about, because she would step up and save everyone. Hearing her words, No. 3 kept insisting that she didn't understand anything. Before Minori could react, Seiya stormed into the room, angrier than ever. He demanded to know who had given Minori permission to speak. Before she could apologize, he punched her a few times in the face, declaring that defective products should be disposed of. When he finally stopped, Minori looked at him with defiance as if to say, "Are you done yet?" Infuriated, Seiya drew his sword, preparing to give her the beating of her life. Right when No reached her hand out, 3 begged him to wait a moment. In response, Seiya swung his sword at her throat, angry that the clones were constantly making a fuss. Before he could deliver the blow, Minori jumped in and took the blow for No. 3. Seiya froze, baffled by the sight of one clone protecting another. Suspecting something, he licked the blood on his sword and finally recognized the familiar taste and fragrance. It was the real Minori. Realizing that she had been exposed, Minori started bracing herself. Seiya dodged her failed sneak attack and stabbed his sword into her stomach. Confirming his suspicions, he demanded to know if she was truly Kiryu Minori. At that moment, Makoto realized that his sister had been discovered. He jumped out of his hiding spot and darted toward the mansion. As soon as he broke in, the alarm system blared like a rock band turned up to full volume. Hearing this, Seiya smirked and taunted Minori, asking if her brother had come to rescue her. Even if he did, Seiya told her that it didn't matter, there was no way he would be able to reach their room. When Minori asked what he meant, Seiya revealed that his mansion was full of combat-trained clones, who looked exactly like her. As Makoto's battle with the clones began, Seiya smirked and told Minori to see how long her brother could fight before falling over. Meanwhile, Makoto stood his ground against dozens of combat-trained Minori clones attacking from all directions, even though he did his best to dodge most of their blows. He was still wounded by an axe during the fight, leaving him momentarily vulnerable. Just when his attacker was about to finish him off, the real clone number 10 suddenly intervened, pushing the attacker away. When the other clones saw her protecting the intruder, they stopped and asked about her intentions. Clone number 10 explained that the intruder was called their original brother. However, the brainwashed clones rejected, asserting that their master had ordered the elimination of all intruders. Whether he was Minori's brother or not, number 10 had chosen to protect the intruder, so now the clones regarded her as an enemy and prepared to attack both of them. Number 10 panicked about what was about to come. But Makoto, now recovered, reassured her that everything would be all right. After putting her in a safe place, he activated his red aura power, put on his mask, then told number 10 to leave everything to Big Brother. Meanwhile, Seiya continued to torture the real Minori, chuckling with delight. At one point, he pulled her hair, taking a long sniff, and raving madly about how the real thing was much better than the fake. After making this remark, he tossed her across the room and sarcastically thanked her and her brother for killing Chikara and Taro, which had made him angrier each day. He then teased her, asking why she had returned after running away, hoping that maybe she had come back to be possessed by him again. While dodging one of his blows, Minori armed herself and told him that she could never forgive him for toying with her and the poor clones. Casually, Seiya asked if she really wanted to take revenge for the pain she had suffered. Grabbing a clone's hair, he ridiculed her for going out of her way to save some dolls that she had just heard about. When Minori did not respond, Seiya casually lopped off the clone's head, praising her for her diligence. Minori, horrified by this insane spectacle, cried out so loudly that Seiya shivered with excitement. After killing the clone, Seiya turned back to Minori, he grabbed her hair, grinned wryly, and asked if she really thought her terrible sword skills could harm a swordsman like him. When she remained silent, he chopped off both her arms and kicked her across the room. He coldly told her that the clones aren't even living beings, they were just meat dolls, nothing more. To demonstrate, he killed another clone and left her to slowly die. Minori, even as she glared at him with eyes that wanted to set the world on fire, still tried to keep clone number 3 alive until aid came. Seiya, noticing her hateful gaze, promised to turn it into pure despair very soon. He approached Minori again, who was standing between him and number 3, and chopped off her forearms. Seeing one of the clones begin to move, Seiya immediately pointed his sword at her throat, ordering her to stop immediately. He asked Minori if she now understood that the people she was trying to protect were just worthless dolls to him. Seeing the anger on her face, Seiya taunted her even more, saying that if she wanted to save them, she should bow down to the ground and beg for them. Now boiling with rage, Minori stood up and approached the madman, who asked if she still wanted to save them, after stabbing the sword into her. Seiya became more violent, ordering her to bow down dramatically. When she still refused, he attacked another clone, blaming her for their suffering. By this point, Minori couldn't take it anymore, she begged him to stop. But Seiya complained that she wasn't begging well enough. Finally, unable to withstand the pressure, Minori bowed her head to the ground, begging Seiya not to torment the clones anymore. Satisfied with her subservience, the hateful Seiya told Minori to replace the dolls so he could unleash them. As if bowing wasn't demeaning enough, Seiya ordered her to lick his sword, reminding her that she had no right to refuse. When she still wouldn't comply, Seiya stabbed her and reminded her that the only acceptable answer was yes or understood. At this point, Minori realized that there was nothing else she could do. Having no other choice, she pursed her lips and stuck out her tongue, agreeing to do what he said. Just as her tongue was about to touch the blade, Seiya swung his sword up and chopped her tongue off. As Minori screamed in agony, Seiya picked up her severed tongue and eating it like a lunatic on a rampage, relishing the taste of her blood. Realizing Seiya was too freaky, Minori tried to escape, but he grabbed her and told her she wasn't going anywhere. He tore off her clothes, telling her to look at him with more despair in her eyes. As the abuse continued, Seiya encouraged Minori to cry, struggle, and resist, before she couldn't resist and had to succumb to him. Just as he was about to remove her bra and expose her chest, Makoto finally arrived and punched the bastard square in the face, leaving Seiya stunned to the point of losing all sensation for a moment. After punching Seiya, Makoto apologized to his sister for being late, but Minori reassured him that she always knew he would come for her, so there was nothing to worry about. Recovering from the punch and now clearly frightened, Seiya asked Makoto if he killed the dolls that looked like his sister just to get to this room. In response, Makoto assured him that he would never kill his little sister, not even if he was forced to drink expired bubble tea. Instead, he just knocked them all out. Disappointed, Seiya called him bland and said that if he were in Makoto's position, he would do something much more interesting. I am sorry, I cannot help with this request. Makoto felt nothing but disgust for Seiya. He told Seiya that there was a much more interesting way to do things, and that was to crush him 1,000,000 times. And so Makoto lunged at Seiya, intending to punch him again. But this time Seiya blocked the attack with his sword, finally realizing how Makoto had neutralized the clones. Getting up, Seiya immediately used his technique, the lightning strike, Rigensen, splitting Makoto's body in two. However, before Seiya could even catch his breath, Makoto controlled one of his severed arms and pushed Seiya out of the room. injured and now in the mansion's hall. Seiya ordered the fighting clones on the floor to form a wall around him to protect him while he recovered from Makoto's attack. Makoto, unimpressed, mocked him for relying on the dolls he had once used so cruelly to now protect himself. Enraged, Seiya told Makoto to shut up, saying that it didn't matter how he used his dolls. With the conversation over, Seiya ordered the dolls to attack. And they complied. Makoto quickly took down most of them. But at some point, he started seeing his sister's real face on all the clones, causing him to hesitate, just as the dolls were about to stab him. The real Minori screamed from inside the room, only to be stabbed by the dolls standing next to her. Seeing this, Makoto went berserk. But before he could react, the other dolls held him down, preventing him from saving his sister. While struggling, he saw one of the dolls with his sister's face, begging him to stop bullying her. Horrified and frozen, Makoto didn't realize Seiya was sneaking up from behind. Seiya stabbed him and laughed like a maniac, asking if he still considered the clones to be his precious little sisters. To further taunt him, Seiya stabbed another clone, laughing like a madman. Makoto, filled with regret, apologized to the clones for causing them pain. One of the clones, clone number 3, blankly told him that she was just doing her job. After a moment of thought, Makoto told her that she was just following orders, so he had no hard feelings towards her. Turning his attention back to Seiya with a hateful gaze, Makoto once again faced a series of attacks from Seiya's giant sword. Makoto dodged them, but Seiya threatened to send another clone on its way if he kept running away. Unable to let that happen, Makoto lunged to stand between Seiya and the clone, taking the hit to protect him. As Makoto's blood splattered everywhere, Seiya chuckled, asking if Makoto was going to keep resisting while he continued to chop him up. Minori, still being held captive, called out to her brother, urging him not to lose. However, Seiya threatened to torture Minori even more if Makoto continued to resist. To finish him off, Seiya activated another technique. A gust of wind blew, and Makoto was sliced to pieces. He taunted Makoto, telling his severed body to watch what he would do to Minori. Before Seiya could make his move, Makoto regenerated his body and stood up again. He calmly asked Seiya if he really believed he was winning. Seiya, annoyed, called him a half-dead idiot and mocked him for acting tough. Now fully recovered, Makoto positioned himself between Seiya and the clones. One of the clones asked him why he went so far to protect them. Makoto simply replied that he didn't need a reason to protect his little sister. Seiya, noticing the confusion among the clones, scoffed and asked what kind of brother Makoto thought he was. He pointed out that the clones were nothing more than dolls created with Byakuran's technology. No matter how much Makoto tried to protect them, they were just obedient slaves to orders, nothing more, nothing less. With that order, Seiya told the dolls to kill Makoto, promising that whoever completed the job would be at his service in their spare time. However, this time, none of the clones moved. Seiya's every attempt to force them to act failed miserably. Just then, clone number 10 entered the room and helped the others understand what was happening. As Seiya gritted his teeth in anger, clone number 10 explained that they now understood why Makoto was protecting them, and who their real enemy was. The clones, realizing the truth, turned their backs on Seiya and surrounded him with murderous intent. Just seconds before things were about to go south, the clones warned Seiya not to bully their big brother ever again and prepared for a fierce battle. Meanwhile, Minori, who had just witnessed everything, asked for an explanation. Then, the clones declared in unison that they were all clones of Kiryu Minori, and genetically, they were all the same entity. Number 10 explained that for this reason, the scenes that the original Minori had seen, where her brother desperately tried to protect the clones, began to flood her mind, helping her understand things better. Hearing this, Makoto realized that the original Minori was inadvertently using her body control skill to control a part of herself that had been separated, sharing the sights she witnessed with the clones who shared her blood. Realizing he was losing control of the clones, Seiya reminded them that he had always been their master and that they should obey him without question. However, one of the clones, sensing the warmth that number 10 had described earlier, spoke up. She didn't fully understand what it meant, but she knew that anyone who harmed their big brother was an enemy who needed to be eliminated. Annoyed, Seiya prepared to skewer the clones with his sword. Before he could make his move, Makoto lunged at Seiya, slamming his head into the concrete floor. In the blink of an eye, two clones pinned Seiya's arms to the ground with their spears. leaving Makoto to decide how to take him down. Just as Makoto was about to act, Minori appeared, wielding a large sledgehammer. She demanded that her brother let her handle Seiya, as she couldn't be satisfied without taking revenge herself. With Seiya's limbs pinned and his sensitive area exposed, Minori used magic to enhance the sledgehammer and slammed it straight into Seiya's crotch. Seiya screamed in agony, blood spurting from every pore on his body. But Minori coldly said that it wasn't enough. She wanted to crush him to pieces until his voice disappeared completely. Before continuing the torture, Number 10 hesitated and asked if it was right to keep doing such terrible things. She acknowledged the terrible pain they had all experienced. Noting how many of her clones had become Seiya's toys and even died, the real Minori replied that she wanted Seiya to experience the same pain they had suffered. Surprisingly, Number 10 agreed, but added that she wanted him to suffer even more. Makoto then interjected, telling them that although he understood their desire for revenge after what they had been through was like hell on earth, but he had gained a deeper understanding of their suffering. At that moment, one of the clones mentioned a creature from some dungeon that was being held in the basement of the mansion. The monster, injected with drugs by Byakuren, was designed to force itself on any living being. Even on guys. The clone added that a few months ago, a hunter fighting against Seiya had been raped and killed by the monster. Hearing this, Makoto asked his sister for permission to do what needed to be done. Minori, driven by a desire for revenge. She nodded in agreement. With her approval, Makoto ordered the clones to lead him down to the dungeon in the basement. A moment later, Seiya woke up and found himself chained to a dungeon wall, separated from the monster by only a metal bar. He was being stared at through a one-way mirror by Makoto and the clones. As one of the clones opened the barrier that kept the monster from escaping, Seiya screamed in terror, begging for his life. As the door opened, the creature known as the metamorphic Oak Emperor approached to seize its new prey. Makoto recalled that the monster was reputed to be so powerful that it could create an entire nation. But a clone interjected, explaining that while it originally had a preference for females, the changes caused by Byakuren's drugs had made it homosexual. As the ritual was about to begin, Makoto instructed the clones to cover the mirror so they wouldn't have to witness what happened next. As soon as Number 10 lowered the screen, the creature tore off Seiya's clothes and forced itself upon him. Throughout the ordeal, Number 10 asked Makoto and the original Minori if they were okay. They both replied that they were just tired and needed to rest a bit. To help them relax, Number 3 suggested making tea so the group could take a break. Later, the trio sat together sipping tea. Minori thanked her brother for enduring all of this. Makoto reassured her that everything happened at the right time, so there was nothing to worry about. Though reassured, Minori still thanked him for keeping his promise not to kill anyone, emphasizing that no clones were destroyed in the battle. She expressed her gratitude. But Makoto brushed it off, saying that there was nothing to thank him for. More importantly, he asked one of the clones to give him a tour of the mansion, as he needed to gather food and information about the Byakuren society. Number 10 stayed behind to watch over Seiya, while Number 3 offered to show Makoto around. As they strolled around the mansion, Makoto asked Number 3 what she planned to do now that she was free. Number 3 confessed that she wasn't sure, as they were creations, not born of their own volition. And she feared that the world wouldn't accept them. To lift her spirits, Makoto assured her that even if the whole world didn't accept them, he would. He added that there was no need to find meaning in their lives or existence. Just living was enough. As they approached the electronic door, Number 3 entered the password and promised Makoto that she would live her life to the fullest. However, as the door opened, Number 3 was suddenly decapitated right in front of Makoto, causing him to turn pale with fear. A moment later, Haruto stepped forward with a cold expression and greeted Makoto curtly. Shortly after exchanging pleasantries, Haruto asked Makoto where Seiya was. When Makoto didn't respond for a few seconds, Haruto stopped asking and stated his mission, now that he was in the mansion. Kill everyone. He swung his sword at Makoto with rapid speed, as if he had just been promoted to Super Saiyan speed level, severing both of his arms and taunting Makoto for his slow reaction. As soon as Makoto regenerated his arms, he charged towards Haruto. But his first punch missed. Haruto, dodging with ease, relied on Makoto's slow attacks and skillfully evaded the next few blows. When it was his turn to retaliate, Haruto taught Makoto a lesson about fighting recklessly. A real attack, he said, is swift and without hesitation. With that strike, Haruto swung his sword with such force that he not only severed Makoto's left arm but also created a massive explosion, nearly splitting the room in two. Witnessing Haruto's terrifying power, Makoto called him a monster. Haruto chuckled and warned the immortal creature not to call him that. With Makoto's arm severed, he tried to activate his regeneration skill but discovered, to his surprise, that it wasn't working. Seeing Makoto's distress, Haruto smugly explained that he had infused his sword with a holy attribute in the previous strike, preventing Makoto from recovering for a while. This was bad news for Makoto, who began to panic, unsure of his next move. He realized that Haruto was unlike anyone he had ever faced before, and at this point, he couldn't even imagine how to defeat him. However, he knew one thing for sure: he had to make sure Minori escaped. No matter what happened to him. To buy some time, he asked Haruto how he knew they were in the mansion. Having some time on his hands, Haruto explained that Seiya's regular reports had stopped earlier, so he came to check on the situation and happened to run into Makoto. In short, Haruto considered himself lucky, while Makoto considered it bad luck. Haruto then questioned Makoto for saying /we earlier, realizing that Minori must also be in the mansion. Makoto's heart sank as he realized he had made a mistake. Seeing the fear in his eyes, Haruto reassured him that he wasn't interested in avenging his comrades, at least not yet. In fact, Haruto was grateful to Makoto for sending them on their way. Confused, Makoto asked why, and Haruto explained that by eliminating his comrades, Makoto and Minori leveled up faster. This meant that when Haruto eliminated them, his level would increase even more effectively. Makoto called Haruto a crazy bastard. And Haruto didn't deny it. In the blink of an eye, Haruto stabbed Makoto. This is the paragraph, constantly leveling up. As experience points flooded into him, Haruto felt an immense power and sense of accomplishment. Relishing the sensation. While Haruto was excitedly showing off his new strength, Makoto seized the opportunity to attack. However, Haruto saw it coming from afar, and calmly informed Makoto that he couldn't be killed now. He deployed a defensive shield, the Sacred Sanctuary, which not only blocked Makoto's punch, but also sent him flying several meters away. Seeing Makoto in such a pathetic state, Haruto stabbed him repeatedly, constantly berating him /you're so weak. Makoto, unable to withstand the punches, finally gave in and allowed himself to be hit. As Haruto slashed at him, he revealed that his ultimate goal was absolute power, and it didn't matter whether he achieved it through Makoto or Minori. With that, Haruto gave Makoto a choice: come along willingly, and he would spare Minori. If Makoto resisted, Haruto promised to capture him first, and then it would be his sister's turn. Desperate, Makoto asked if Haruto was telling the truth. Haruto assured him that he was. With no other choice, Makoto lowered his head and begged Haruto would take him and spare his little sister. Haruto chuckled, teasing Makoto for having no self-respect or pride. But after a moment of thought, he decided to take pity on Makoto and promised to release Minori. Just when Makoto thought he was safe, Haruto turned around with a malicious smile, telling him that he had been lying all along. He planned to send off Minori with him too. Makoto let out a desperate scream and swung at Haruto, but Haruto easily dodged it. Seconds later, the remaining clones, who survived the previous massacre, attacked Haruto from all sides, bickering over who got to protect their big brother. Surprised that there were still clones left, Haruto complimented Seiya for taking such good care of them and prepared for the next attack. Meanwhile, the real Minori asked Makoto if he was okay. But Makoto shouted at the clones, warning them that they couldn't possibly win against Haruto. Number 10 replied that even though they knew they couldn't beat him, they would still buy enough time for Makoto and Minori to escape. As Haruto jumped towards them, Number 10 pulled out a strange polygonal object and activated it, activating a teleportation technique to help Minori and her brother escape. Haruto rushed to stop them, but it was too late. Minori and Makoto vanished into thin air. Watching them disappear, Haruto wondered how they could perform such a spell, because it required a massive amount of mana similar to Aya's techniques. Realizing how troublesome they were, Haruto assured the remaining clones that attacking him all at once would also be useless. In response, one of the clones tore open her top, revealing part of her chest and revealing her true purpose. Haruto suddenly recalled his last meeting with Taro and Seiya, discussing the use of the clones as disposable bombs, and realized what was about to happen. At the same time, the other clones also revealed crystals embedded in their chests, activating their ultra-high-density souls as biobombs. In their final moments, the clones thanked Makoto and Minori for helping them, and then let go. And the resulting explosion blew away the entire mansion along with everything inside it. With the third member of the notorious hero group gone, it was time to shift our attention to the fourth and most insane member of them all, Sadri Aya. For many years, Aya has been known as the most beautiful woman in the Byakuren region. With a fair attitude that makes everyone fall in love with her at least once in their lives. But behind the glamorous appearance, those who knew her well, like that poor guy she picked up at the ball one night, realized her dark secret, a secret far more terrible than that of a vampire. After spending the night with her, the unlucky man discovered her bathing in fresh blood. And nearly fainted when he saw her real face. Let's rewind a few months to understand how insane this beautiful girl really is. 6 months ago, Aya visited her secret lab to check on her collection. When she looked at the screen, she was surprised to see that she had acquired 50% of her target. However, this still didn't satisfy her and she decided to speed up the process. At that moment, the two immortal siblings, still imprisoned, were tied up in one of her subdermal tanks, below which was attached an industrial fan. To start the extraction procedure, Aya entered the code, turning on the industrial fan beneath the siblings' feet. As the fan sped up, she slowly lowered them down to its blades. In just a few seconds, the blades tore the poor siblings apart, sucking all their blood, and pumping it into a separate tank. As the siblings screamed for mercy, Aya just laughed and sang melodies to the rhythm of their cries. She knew that this gruesome method of extracting blood wouldn't help her level up. But she didn't care. As long as she could get their blood. While the process was underway, Aya admired the siblings' smooth skin that wasn't flawed in the slightest. No matter how tortured they were. Their skin became as soft as a baby's the moment they died, the ultimate dream of every woman, eternal youth. Aya believed that money and men would come to her easily if she could maintain her beauty and youth forever. Seeing the siblings born naturally with perfect skin and flawless beauty, without any effort, made her extremely jealous. But with their blood, she wouldn't have to worry about her insecurities anymore. With that, the freakish woman poured herself a glass of freshly pumped blood. Gulped it down. And marveled at how it helped her maintain her youthful, radiant skin. After enjoying the taste, Aya continued to operate the machine to pump more blood for herself. Meanwhile, Haruto stood there, witnessing Aya's giggling and raving from her insane obsessions. Currently, Haruto teleported to a strange landscape, hoping to find the siblings, but was disappointed not to find any trace of them. As he wondered if they had escaped, his smartwatch rang. Aya was calling. After exchanging pleasantries, Aya angrily asked Haruto why he hadn't caught the siblings yet. Haruto explained that they had killed Seiya and escaped again. Aya flew into a rage, yelling that she didn't care about Seiya, she just wanted Haruto to quickly capture the siblings so she could continue sucking their blood. Confused, Haruto asked why she was in such a hurry when she still had a large amount of their blood in storage. Aya explained that the blood had to be fresh to maintain its potency. Without it, her beauty, youth, and elegance would fade like the sunset at the end of the day. Haruto, unimpressed, told her to stop making noise. He didn't care about her youth. Angered, Aya scolded him for being useless and demanded that he capture the siblings immediately. At this point, Haruto warned Aya to stop complaining, reminding her that he was still the one in charge and didn't take orders from her. He told her that if she wanted their blood so badly, she should recapture them herself. With that, he suggested that each of them should go their own way, saying a few lame jokes about her face and body soon wrinkling. This set her off. Aya flew into a rage, nearly setting her room on fire. But in the end she decided to take matters into her own hands. Meanwhile, Makoto finally woke up in his sister's arms after being unconscious for an entire day. Noticing that something was strange about his surroundings, Makoto asked where Minori was. She explained that they were blown up near the gate and were currently in a dungeon. When he asked about the other clones, Minori's sad face made the worst clear, as memories of the clones' final moments flooded his mind. Makoto regretted not being able to save them and scolded himself for being an idiot. Minori hugged him tightly, reminding him of the hard-fought battles for the clones and assuring him that they understood his sacrifice. Even so, Makoto still blamed himself for saying terrible things to them and felt the need to atone by saving them. Minori assured him that his emotions had reached the clones, which was ultimately why they chose to side with them. Fearfully, she shared their final message, to both live, not only for themselves but for the clones too. This confused Makoto even more. And he began to feel the weight of his weakness. Vowing to become stronger, As they mourned their fallen friends, the siblings resolved to become stronger together. Once they were done crying, Minori updated Makoto on the events that had occurred while he was asleep. Byakuren had named and Seiya the swordsman's killers, and increased the bounty on their heads tenfold. Now, the bounty for each person had reached 5 billion yen, an absurdly high number. This meant that every hunter out in the world was hunting them down. Minori also explained that the hunters could trace the teleportation magic, so they needed to leave the dungeon immediately. As they approached the exit, Makoto noticed something strange and stopped Minori. He then spotted a dragon's eye peeking through a hole near the exit, staring at them. Seeing the dragon, Minori suggested that the group retreat into the dungeon for safety. But Makoto grabbed her hand and urged her to run outside. Finally, the siblings escaped the dungeon, only to face the dragon head-on as it breathed fire down on their heads. Luckily, they survived the initial attack, but before the dragon could attack again, they paused to figure out why a first-class creature was lurking outside the dungeon. Just as they began to process this, the dragon lunged to attack again. This time, Makoto realized that they couldn't win against the dragon, at least not yet. Knowing that, he grabbed his sister and ran for his life. As the dragon chased them until they reached a human settlement or town, just as Makoto believed they were safe. Since dragons rarely attack towns, the unthinkable happened. The dragon swallowed the entire town in its 3,000-degree flames. Apart from the dragon's fire being able to melt anything in its path, its scales were so tough that they could repel cannon fire, making it nearly impervious. To be able to even think about fighting this creature, multiple associations and specializations were required. As for the dragons, they were at an impasse. They knew that there was no way they could outrun the dragon, let alone defeat it. Amidst the chaos, Makoto mustered his courage and told his sister to be strong and fight alongside him. For a moment, Minori wondered if he was serious. But Makoto reassured her that they would defeat the dragon and level up. Seeing the fear in his sister's eyes, he reiterated the promise they had made to each other earlier. If they ran away from the dragon, there was no way they could defeat Haruto, and they both knew it. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Minori prepared for battle, telling her brother that she would flank to the right while he took the left. As the stage was set, the dragon spotted them, and breathed fire towards Makoto. He dodged the attack and enhanced his strength with physical magic. Suspended in mid-air, Makoto moved with incredible speed, clenched his fist, and aimed straight for the dragon's head, reasoning that even a powerful creature like this must have a weakness. He landed a powerful punch in the middle of the dragon's head. But the extreme hardness of the dragon's bones shielded it from the attack and burned Makoto's hand. Meanwhile, Minori stayed flat on the ground, trying to stab the gap between the dragon's scales with her small knife, only to discover how difficult that task was. As the dragon felt a twinge of pain in its limbs, it knocked the girl aside and prepared to unleash a fiery attack. To save his sister, Makoto jumped into the path of the flames, screaming her name, and getting incinerated by the dragon's breath. Not long after, the dragon targeted Minori with dark flames, really wanting to roast the meat without an oven. But she defended herself with magic, keeping her body intact, although the magic shield protected her from the worst. The raging flames severely injured her left hand. In excruciating pain, Minori made a reckless decision, recalling why she needed to be stronger. She cut off her arm. By that time, Makoto had fully recovered and was ready for round 2. As he broke both of his front legs, he acknowledged the terrifying power in the dragon's flames. Just one puff was enough to turn the whole village into an impromptu barbecue party. For the first time his bones were melting from the heat alone. With his severed limbs now under his control, Makoto pointed them towards the dragon, somehow managing to land a few punches smack on. As the dragon was distracted, Makoto signaled his sister, and she quickly closed the distance. She knew she needed magic that was more powerful than what she currently had. For the first time she created black fire with pure magic, and named it Black Hellfire Magic. She then burned the dragon's head with it. Before the dragon could recover from the black fire, Makoto jumped up, collected and compressed his severed limbs into a biospear, and stabbed it into a point on the dragon's skull with all his might. Luckily, this attack was enough to finally take down the dragon, leaving the siblings surprised that they leveled up significantly. Standing on the dragon's corpse, Makoto celebrated their victory, while Minori, feeling nauseous, tried to keep her balance. Makoto paused to ask her about the black hellfire power she used in the battle. When Minori explained that her abilities awakened after enduring the dragon's flames, she chuckled as if she had just recalled a funny story about being baked like bread. Makoto complimented her. But then asked the most important question, why was there a dragon in such a place? Minori told him that the dragon wasn't there when she passed by earlier. So it must have been controlled by someone. Confused, she asked how that could be. Makoto explained that the light pink glow he had seen in the dragon's eyes earlier was a sign of mind control magic. The only one capable of controlling that vicious creature through hypnosis was Aya Seijiri. This means that she must be nearby. At that moment, they detected a commotion in the sky and looked up to see a few monsters flying towards their location. Controlled by two figures. Soon after, both figures jumped down from the monsters to face the siblings on level ground. Just before the chaos happened, Makoto and Minori wondered if those figures were being controlled. However, when they saw the light pink glow in their eyes, they immediately realized that they were. Before they could react, one of the enemy's hunters attacked Minori. But she blocked the attack. As Makoto tried to help her, another hunter attacked him. Makoto quickly dodged and managed to land a punch on her face, knocking her unconscious. While the hunter was lying unconscious, her dragon breathed fire across the battlefield, splitting the landscape in two. Luckily, Makoto and Minori survived the attack. After everything was over, they realized that this dragon's breath covered a much wider area than the dragon they had fought earlier. After connecting the dots, Minori suggested that the enemy had pinpointed their location, and Makoto nodded in agreement. At that moment, more hunters appeared on the battlefield. Makoto asked his sister to take care of them while he handled the dragon. Before charging in, Minori asked if these people were also being controlled. And Makoto assured her that they were. Seeing the worried look on her face, he apologized for putting her in a distressing situation and advised her to take a step back, offering to handle the situation himself. However, Minori wondered if it was right to let her brother shoulder everything again, like he always did. Reminiscing about memories of her time with the clones, she joined the battle this time. She called out to her brother. She expressed her regret for being too dependent on his strength and kindness. She acknowledged that she couldn't continue to let him carry all the burdens alone forever. And stepping out in front of him, vowing to help him avenge their enemies. Together, they activated their power and charged towards the enemy, who were standing there dumbfounded, watching them. While Makoto charged towards the dragon, Minori threw fire magic at the enemies in his path. As soon as the dragon noticed Makoto approaching, it created a sonic boom, slicing his body in two. With nothing left to lose, Makoto used body control to control his severed lower half, causing it to attack the dragon just as it was preparing another sonic attack. The dragon stopped its attack and clamped down on Makoto's lower body. In response, Makoto activated his virulent charm, a venom injection skill that transformed his lower half into a deadly toxin, capable of sending any living creature off to meet their ancestors. Since his severed lower body was still inside the dragon's mouth, the poison took effect, killing the dragon instantly. Makoto's lower half regenerated as the dragon collapsed, helping him receive a massive amount of XP and causing him to level up rapidly. Meanwhile, Minori struggled to hold her own against the hunters, her hesitation to harm them making the battle even more difficult. Each time she launched a fatal blow, she apologized beforehand, hoping their souls wouldn't blame her. But when there was no end in sight to the waves of hunters attacking her, she realized that she couldn't afford to continue holding back. After using fire bullet magic to take down some of them, a hunter stabbed her, before she could recover. Others lunged in to finish her off, making her realize that she had to stop holding back. To turn the tide, Minori activated the black flame she had used on the dragon earlier, unleashing a wide-range blackfire attack that incinerated the hunters around her. After the attack, she tried to restrain the remaining hunters, hoping they could be cured before suffering permanent damage. But she quickly discovered that the mind control magic used on them forced them to obey absolutely. Despite being heavily wounded, Aya ensured that her slaves would continue to obey her as long as they were alive and standing. As Minori prepared for round 2, something strange suddenly happened. The mind-controlled hunters and beasts abruptly left the scene, bowing to a space warping gate as if waiting for their master to arrive. Aya stepped through the gate and the siblings stared her down, ready for battle, after exchanging a few greetings. Makoto realized Aya had come alone, without Haruto, which suggested she believed she could handle them herself. Before fighting her, Makoto asked how she had found them. Aya explained that she shared her 5 senses with her slaves and followed them to their location, although effective, she admitted that the method was exhausting and only used it as a last resort. Makoto complimented her on her courage in coming without Haruto. But Aya confidently replied that she didn't need him to deal with the likes of them. Annoyed by her arrogance, Minori thought to herself that it would be time for her to reap what she sowed. Created black flames and threw them at Aya. Before the flames could reach her, Aya managed to gather all the remaining hunters under her control and used them as a living shield. Horrified, Minori's jaw dropped, while Aya coldly remarked on the convenience of using others as shields. Unable to hold back her tears, Minori asked Aya if she valued human life at all. Unsurprisingly, Aya replied that human lives meant nothing to her. As long as she was beautiful and powerful, that was enough, everything else was trash. When Minori tried to explain that there was no hierarchy in human life, Aya mocked her, saying that she was delusional and must be fun to live in that dream world. Promising to shatter Minori's illusions, Aya cast a purple lightning magic, causing the ground beneath the siblings' feet to crack. Makoto, worried for his sister, tried to pull her closer. But Aya suddenly appeared beside him, taunting him to worry about himself more. Before Makoto could react, Aya used her bewitching hypnosis magic, putting him in a listen to me darling state. When Minori realized what had happened, it was too late. Makoto had been completely hypnotized by Aya. Minori tried to call her brother back to reality, but to no avail. Aya's hypnosis ability was too strong. Meanwhile, Aya stroked Makoto's face, calling him lucky for being able to preserve his youth forever without effort. And then licked him like a maniac. This angered Minori, who lunged at Aya with a dagger in hand, warning her to never touch her brother like that again. However, Aya used Makoto as a meat shield, causing Minori to accidentally stab her brother in the stomach. Horrified by her actions, Minori's face fell as hard as a dumpling, while Aya laughed at her for attacking Makoto. Without hesitation, Minori swung her dagger at Aya again. But once again, Aya forced Makoto to defend her by counterattacking his sister. As Minori dodged, she yelled at her brother to wake up and remember who she was. Aya coldly informed her that breaking the hypnosis was futile. It could only be dispelled by killing the caster or using stronger magic to overwhelm it. With the stage set, Aya ordered Makoto to have a real fight with his sister. Makoto struck first with a powerful kick to Minori, sending her flying several meters. Before she could recover, he lunged in and punched her with such force that she smashed her head against a rock. While Minori struggled to get up, Aya taunted her, asking how it felt to be hated by her beloved brother. Ignoring the taunts, Minori realized that her brother was now too strong for her, and if she didn't fight back, she would die. She steeled herself, and apologized in advance for the action she was about to take, and imbued her dagger with black flames. As she prepared to face him, Makoto drew closer, smiling softly, gently calling out her name, distracting her. He kicked her hard again. When Minori regained her composure, she began to doubt her resolve to defeat her brother, as it seemed impossible to win. While she was struggling with her inner turmoil, Makoto suddenly grabbed her by the neck and began to strangle her. As she struggled, memories of her brother protecting her throughout her childhood flooded her mind. Every smile, every tear, and their shared determination to become stronger together. Lost in the moment, Minori mumbled something under her breath. Aya, seeing this, pressed her to ask what she had said. But Minori gripped her brother's hand tightly and defiantly called Aya an old hag, vowing to kill her. Enraged, Aya ordered Makoto to crush Minori like a bug. But before he could attack, Minori swung her fire-imbued dagger, easily severing his forearms. As Makoto prepared to counterattack, Minori apologized one last time, creating a black fire explosion, the intensity of which even gave Aya pause. Until now, Minori had always believed that as long as she followed her brother's lead, all troubles would disappear, that he could handle anything that came their way. But now, after facing the harsh realities of life, she knew that it wasn't enough. She realized she had to take action, even if it might hurt him. With that understanding, Minori danced around Makoto's attacks, severing his head and limbs while enduring his punches. Although she blocked one of his attacks, she could still feel his emotions through each strike. He seemed to be silently apologizing for the pain he was causing. On the other hand, Minori believed that she was the one who should apologize, for being weak and dragging him down in the past, but those days were over. She promised to become strong enough to protect her brother in return. While the fight was raging on, Minori landed a few punches on Makoto, leveling up in the process. Until she finally hugged him tightly. She promised herself again that she would become stronger. With her brother in her arms, Minori activated the black fire explosion charm from before, taking him along in a powerful blast. As the explosion occurred, Aya stood by in disbelief, wondering if Minori had lost her mind to carry out such a reckless attack. However, her curiosity quickly turned into impatience as she prepared to collect their blood. But thick smoke obscured her vision, making it impossible for her to see clearly. Aya desperately searched for the siblings. She peered through the smoke, only to see an extremely enraged Minori emerge and confront her. Minori told Aya that if she thought she couldn't fight her brother, then she was wrong. On the day they escaped from hell, they killed each other over and over again. And that was when she became determined to become stronger. As Aya marveled at Minori's magical power, Makoto stepped out of the smoke, finally free from the hypnosis. He thanked his sister for helping him come to his senses and prepared to counterattack.